Jennie Taylor, widow of the Honorable Major Brent Taylor of the Utah Army National Guard. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, it's been a few months since your husband's passing. How are you and the children doing?
I think we're doing all right. We go up and we go down, but we keep coming back up. So for me, that feels like a big victory. We don't stay down too long, and we've got a lot of people loving us and helping us and supporting us.
When you're down in those valleys, and I trust that they are coming a little further and further apart as time goes on, but when you're down in those valleys, how do you get back up again?
A lot of times it's just the kids. Somebody needs a ride somewhere, somebody needs to be tucked in, somebody's got homework to do, and just the everyday necessities of life get me back up and going. But the other day, for example, I just kind of sat on the kitchen floor and cried for a while, thinking, I'm not going to get up for a while, and that's okay. Then I started cleaning the house and kept crying, and I did some laundry and kept crying. And I just think, I know what I know. My love for Brent is so strong, and that's why it hurts. And I sometimes joke with my kids, you know, they see me crying, Mom, are you okay? Yeah, I just missed Dad. Would you rather I be glad he's gone? You know, of course not. So when we get down, we try to rally around each other and again, rely on that support group, rely on God, and just pray for the fortitude to keep going and stop trying to look so far ahead. Just take it a minute at a time sometimes.
What is the most difficult part of having him gone?
Having him gone. The most difficult and the most worrisome for me is the kids' sake. You know, if you were to ask any of our 7 kids if they wanted to be raised by one of the 2 of us for the rest of their lives, I think they all would have chosen him. He's their favorite. They have a very special bond with him, especially the older kids. So to see them and to know they didn't make this choice conscientiously. Brent and I prayerfully and deliberately, very intentionally chose this path, not necessarily his death, but his path of service, our path of service to our country. They were just born into it. So the hardest part for me is to think, in a way, we've kind of dragged these kids along, and without them being able to say much before they were born, hey, this is or isn't what I want to do. But we just rely on our great faith that God has led us as a family and will continue to help me, help them, and help other people come into their lives that can hopefully help fill that void, never fully replace their father, but great community members and extended family and friends who are helping to reach out to them and support and love them.
No doubt when you first received word that your husband had been killed, that it was an inside job, there were those moments when you just couldn't believe that it was actually true. When did it really become real to you?
I'm not sure it's really real yet, most of the time. You know, when they first told me that, I actually wasn't home. I got a phone call. My mother was babysitting. She told me 2 officers were on our door in uniform. I've been in the military long enough to know what that means. So I was an hour or 2 away from when I met face-to-face with the officers to find out the news. I had a lot of time in my head and in my heart to think through what that might mean and what that might look like. But there are still moments of the day when we do get going in the day-to-day things of life where it feels kind of normal for a minute and it will suddenly hit, and I think, oh, it's still true. Mornings I wake up, oh, it's still true. So I don't think the shock has worn off completely. Certainly not in the initial time. Brent was gone over 10 months when he was first killed, so we were used to him not being there all day, every day. I think my hardest part, my lowest low so far, has been when we hit the 1-year mark from when he left, the time when he should have been coming home. And then it started to sink in that he's not just deployed anymore. This deployment should be done. It's been extended a lot longer than any of the other deployments got extended.
When you were at your lowest points, what is it inside you that keeps you from staying low?
The same thing that sent Brent to Afghanistan in the first place, my love for God, family, and country. I love him, I love God, and I love my children. And in those moments between when I knew there were officers on their way to meet me and when they actually met me, I pulled out a notebook and a pen and began writing furiously my thoughts. And one of the things I wrote was, I cannot fall apart. The kids matter too much. I cannot. It's not an option. If 4 months ago you would have told me this was coming, I would have said, there's no way I can do this. There is absolutely no way. I will be a puddle on the floor. I will fall apart, and you better just never leave me alone. And yet, 100 days ago this happened, and by the grace of God, I'm still standing. And I think we're doing remarkably well considering the circumstances. And what is it within me? It's got to be my faith in God, my love for Brent, and the love we share for this country and for those beautiful, precious children.
The two of you certainly were partners in life together, but you were also partners in the mission of serving country and community. In your wildest planning through this combined mission, did either of you ever contemplate this contingency?
No.
Where he would be gone?
No, absolutely not. And that's why it's been the biggest shock of my life. But I also think that certainty, he was so certain every time that he was coming home. Every deployment, he was so certain. And that certainty let him be an amazing soldier, because he held nothing back. Not that he took foolish risks, but he never felt, oh, I better not do that, or I better stick to the bare minimum. I better just check the box of what I'm supposed to do and then nothing more. He was so confident that he would be there and that he would be back here so he could give his all day, every day. And I, in some of the quiet moments of the last 100 days, have found great peace in that. He never would have chosen this over me and the children. And to him, that was a choice he never had to make. He was confident he could serve there and come back and be with us. And because of that, he never held back. It's a great thing to live without fear. It's a great thing to not wonder and hem and haw. And for the most part, it's the same with me. I asked him when he left, I said, are you going to come back? I cannot do this without you. He said, I'm going to come back. Okay. Then I didn't need to worry every day. I didn't need to watch every news story with massive anxiety. I didn't need to spend the entire 10 or 11 months of that deployment sick to my stomach. I was able to focus on the children, focus on home, focus on what I needed to do, trusting he was doing his job, and after a year or so, we'd be back together. So, no, never saw it coming, which is probably foolish. We probably should have considered it more. He was clearly going into harm's way. But I consider it a great gift from God that we were both able to say we will give 100%, knowing that the risk is there, and yet not tripping every day over that possible risk, the possible what ifs, the possible anxieties. I mean, you'll make yourself crazy regardless of your line of work if you think like that.
How much detail did they give you about what happened?
You probably know more than I do, because I imagine you read the paper that day. We're waiting on an investigation from the military. I was told he was killed. I was told it was an inside attack and that he was on a ruck march, which is like a hike. From speaking with him very frequently while he was deployed, I know they did these hikes every Saturday. It was a normal thing, he and the Afghan men. He loved being with the Afghan soldiers above and beyond the required time. Building relationships with him was paramount to being able to be a leader and to be effective. Plus, he just loved them. He had these great friendships. So when they first told me, I can't remember the words exactly how they said it, but I can remember myself saying, a ruck march? They killed him on a ruck march? Not a raid, not a great mission, not something covert that I can't know the details of because it's classified. A ruck march? So yeah, I'll admit that added to the shock, for sure. You know, there was one time, about 14 years ago, when I very first was pregnant with our first daughter. I was teaching school at the time. Brent was young and still in school and working. And he called me at the end of a school day. I can picture myself answering the phone. And he said, hey, we need to talk when I get home. And that was the first time a possible deployment conversation came up. And that's the one time we discussed, what if you die? That's the one time we talked about, do we really mean this? We both said, long before we knew each other, we both loved America. We both loved God. We both felt this drive to do something with our lives that mattered. And we spent a very long and tearful night that night in December, talking about it, asking ourselves, do we really mean this? Are we really willing to do this? And we decided that yes, and that's really the last time we ever visited that. It was a decision we made once, and then from then on it was just full steam ahead, service to God and country and community, and the details and the opportunities that came up along the way, whether they were military or community or politics, all fell under that great umbrella of that decision or that discussion we had had. When he first found out about this last deployment, it was August, before the January that he left. Once again, he called me. This time I was home. I can still picture where I was. I answered the phone. He said, we need to talk when I get home. And the only thing I said is, where are you going? So we'd already had that initial conversation. Everything else fell under that for the next 15 years.
It is very clear that the two of you were the closest of close. Was there any kind of premonition prior to those two officers showing up on your front doorstep? Did you have any idea that something was wrong?
Looking ahead from 4 months ago, no. Looking back, I can see things where I feel like maybe I was being prepared, or certain thoughts or moments that came to me in my mind that in retrospect make sense in a different way. Several months ago, I found myself thinking, you know, we have 7 beautiful, healthy children. We've never had a child with a disease, with a disability. We've never lost a child. So many people with large families, statistics, odds are that your whole family doesn't make it all the way through. And I began wondering and worrying that maybe at some point, while raising our children, we might lose one of our children. And that was a very sobering thought. And it stopped me in my tracks of sometimes being very busy, trying to keep up with everything, and to start paying more attention, thinking, oh, what would I do if I lost one of these beautiful children? Never for a second did I think, what if I lost Brent? Because he told me he was coming back, right. And that was enough. That was enough for me.
But at the time that it happened, you had no idea.
No idea. You know, 2 weeks before, he and I had spoken. It was the election time in Afghanistan, and one of his very close friends, a young lieutenant from Afghanistan, was killed. And I remember talking with him about that, saying, how do you keep going? You see so much death. You have so many of these Afghan servicemen that you love and serve with. They're being killed at a much faster rate than our men. You know, fortunately for us, but of course, unfortunately for the war in general. And he said, you know, we'll have a memorial. He kind of walked me through what happens when there is a casualty in theater. And then the next day you get up and you go back to work because you have to. You know, when someone dies, when Brent died, the world stops for a while. Everyone stops. No one cares about school or work or bills or mowing the lawn or shoveling the snow. None of that matters for at least those first couple of weeks between death and burial. We freeze everything. That's not a liberty they have in a war zone. They unfortunately see it a lot more often. So we, ironically, had that conversation just a couple of weeks before he was killed. He walked me through what happens when someone is killed and expressed his sorrow, and he expressed his gratitude that so many of these Afghan men and women are willing to lay down their lives for their country as our country tries to fight for their freedom with them. And I just find that to be one of those moments I look back and see a lot more meaning in now than I did at the time in October of last year.
Your husband had a profound effect on the soldiers he served with, both U.S. and Afghani. You received a letter from one of those soldiers talking about the changes in his life brought on by the example of your husband. What does that do inside you to hear of that kind of an effect by your husband?
It makes me very proud of him. You know, the pride in my husband can soften the grief. Of course, I miss him. It hurts that he's not here. Like I said, sometimes I think it hurts more now than 3 months ago because that shock a little bit is wearing off. I'll look at pictures and think, he's not coming back. But to know that he's impacted lives both here and abroad, that takes away from that sting because it gives purpose. It gives purpose to my suffering. It gives purpose to his sacrifice. It gives purpose to the sacrifice our children have paid without ever really knowing they were. And to know that he loves his children. I know he loves me. He honors family above all. And to know that he would maybe impact another man and his view of his wife and his children and his family, that makes me very proud of him, and that helps me smile through the tears.
Your husband was the sole breadwinner at your house. How are you keeping body and soul together now?
Again, by the grace of God, we had our life insurance through the military, which wasn't nearly enough. Again, we just didn't really ever talk about it. We didn't think. Yeah. I've since told the National Guard and other insurance salesmen, if they ever want me to come speak to crowds about why you need more life insurance than you think, I'm your girl to do that. But fortunately, in the aftermath of Brent's death, a GoFundMe account was set up. And I didn't know about it for the first couple of days. It was when I got back from Dover after having received Brent's remains on American soil that my family members let us know that there was a GoFundMe account at the time, you know, a very large sum of money that I felt like I couldn't even receive. I couldn't possibly take that from people, and then that number grew. But I look at it now and think that is a way that I can stay home with my children, They don't have to lose their dad as a casualty at war and then me to a couple of jobs. I would have to work at least a couple of jobs to pay daycare, to pay just to make ends meet. It's a huge blessing. It's a huge blessing, one that I feel very grateful for and indebted to our community and people all over who've helped donate to our family so that I can be home with those children. I know a lot of people in similar circumstances who aren't so fortunate, and it does not escape me just how fortunate I am to be able to have that available to us.
What effect has this had on your children? And I would imagine that there are both good and bad things that have happened in their lives because of this. What are some of the good? What are some of the bad?
You know, I think that's a question we'll probably be answering for the next decade or 5 or 6 decades. It's hard to say, you know, what's the result, what's the effect of your father being killed in action. I would hope one of the good things that comes from it is they have seen an unbelievable outpouring of charity. The power of love, the power of a casserole, the power of a Christmas present, the power of a neighbor stopping by to help. Now that has its flip side when you're young children and maybe you don't understand why there's always people over or why I've been gone, you know, different things. When I did need to go to Dover to receive Brent, or we've traveled a little bit more to different things than we normally did. So I hope when they look back on this, they're able to remember and see just this huge outpouring of patriotism. And I hope that they're able to stand proud and remember that their father helped pay part of the price of freedom. We talk about it a lot. Sometimes they roll their eyes, especially the older, oh, there goes mom again, another mom lecture. But I feel such a debt to our community, such a debt to this nation that is treating us like gold, that I feel a very heavy responsibility to teach my children to honor their father's legacy and to recognize that he didn't start the legacy. He's just carrying it on like so many others are. So some of the drawbacks, of course, they love Dad. He's fun. He's the fun parent. I'm the mom. You know, we all were counting down to him coming home. We were counting down to going to Disneyland as a family. We were counting down to planting our garden this spring. We were counting down to just having him home. And then that sinks in. He's not home yet, and he's not coming home. So there are those very sober moments when it catches up with us. And for the most part, we just try to cling to each other and remember that the sacrifice is worth making. The price of freedom is excruciatingly high, but what if we didn't pay it? What if we didn't pay it? The greatest honor of my life is being able to say our family has pitched in a little bit. And it's only a little bit in the grand scheme of things, but I hope that's what my children will get from this
I think it's
in time.
I think it's a lot more than just a little bit. Yeah, I mean, your family has been called upon to make the ultimate sacrifice. And there are relatively few in our society who are called upon to make that sacrifice. How do you teach that lesson to your children?
You know, I think in a way we teach that simply by talking about Dad, his memories. They have a lot of memories, a lot of fun things. We have videos and pictures. They know that their father, the soldier, was their father, the patriot, always. It wasn't just, oh, he deployed, and while he deployed, he was a great American. He was always a great American, a great father, a great statesman. And so to help them see, like you said, not all of us are personally impacted by military service. And that's a wonderful thing in the sense that it means we're not losing tens of thousands a day. This isn't World War II. This isn't Vietnam or Korea. This isn't the Civil War, where in a couple of days at Gettysburg we lost so many. Fortunately, the numbers are fairly small, relatively speaking. And so this is a chance, very personal chance, for our children to never wonder about that price of freedom. And for us as a family to talk about that, to try to keep it in perspective. And I've told them before, and I'll tell them for years to come, they can either hide in their father's shadow, or they can do as he did and stand on the shoulder of giants. They can now stand on his shoulders, his memory, his legacy, and be proud of him, be proud of what he stood for, what he fought for, and what he died for. And for me, it's ultimately important that they understand that in Brent's eyes, service to God, family, and country were one. In a very unique way, he could see the three of those as one. Serving our country was service to our family. He wasn't choosing serving our country over our family. And that's something that's difficult to teach a child, but I'm determined to help them in time see that. Dad went to Afghanistan for the Afghan people, but he also went for his children. And I've actually found a journal entry from Brent's first deployment to Afghanistan where he ponders the question at the top of the page, why do I do this? He had just left us. He said how hard it is to leave his wife and children. Never gets easier, he said. And then he asks himself, so why do I go? And then he answers the question. And one of the things, the first thing he says is, I go so that my children have something to be proud of, and a country to be proud of, and a safe and free life. So yes, he was fighting to liberate the Afghan people. Yes, he was fighting as a member of the United States Army. Yes, he was fighting as a member of the Utah National Guard. But he was fighting as a father for the freedom and the safety of his children. It might take them time to see it that way, but I hope and pray that they'll see it that way.
There are some overt things that you are doing to keep your husband's legacy alive. What are some of those things?
At home, we just talk a lot. We talk a lot as if he's very present. We joke about what he would think of this breakfast or that mess or that silly thing the kids do. We try to do some of the silly things he would do. Some of the media things and community things, I certainly never asked for any of them or signed up or saw that coming. But if the opportunity arises to celebrate freedom and patriotism, I will never turn it down. I will never turn that down.
Your husband is going to have his name placed on the Veterans Center in Ogden. What does that do to you inside?
Again, it makes me very proud. It makes me proud to think that his name will be honored. You know, in time, politically, there will be people who maybe don't ever know that he served as mayor. They don't remember him personally. But to have his name affixed to something that's intending to serve other veterans, that to me is a beautiful thing. This is not the Brent Taylor story. This is not the Taylor family story. This is a story of American military men and women throughout generations of time. And for a veterans facility that offers care and resources to other veterans, that's what Brent would want. He would want his name to stand for that, not just a selfish focus, but to be something, an outreach center that reaches out to all men and women in uniform. So.
You were recently invited by 1st District Congressman Rob Bishop of Utah to attend the State of the Union address in Washington. Tell us about that experience and what did you get out of the speech?
It was an incredible experience. You know, I was a history teacher before I was a mom, and I've always loved this country. I always dreamed of someday, you know, walking the halls of Congress, or what would that look like. I felt like I was in a movie scene. To be there with Rob Bishop was so kind. His staff was so kind. I joked at the end of the trip, they treated me like I was the Queen of England. Everyone was just above and beyond gracious and kind and thanking us for our sacrifice and praising Brent's name and our family in a way that I left feeling so proud of him, so proud to be an American, I almost forgot to be sad for a couple of days. And it was just an amazing, remarkable experience. And to be in the House chamber, to look and think, there are the members of the Senate, there are the members of the House, there are members of the Supreme Court and the Pentagon officials, the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We're all in the same room. And there was something thrilling when it was announced, speaking to the Madam Speaker, the President of the United States. There's just something thrilling in hearing that phrase, yeah. Yes. And to know that the President and Vice President were in that room, it's not a matter to me of what the name of any elected official is. I, for a moment, was suspended without the limits of time in a chamber representing from George Washington down what America's beauty is, to celebrate this state of our union. And I loved hearing about the different guests of the President and First Lady. To me, that was the highlight of the speech. I wasn't there for politics. I wasn't there for one side or the other. But when he spoke of the three men that were there in D-Day, the man that was liberated from the concentration camp, the little girl fighting cancer, the police officers that helped save lives, that's what makes the state of our union strong. These wonderful American people. And it was just a thrill. I look back and think, did that really happen? I got on the plane and thought, wow, that was 24 hours on a movie set where I got to be the star for a while and then go home. And then I was very happy to come home. But it was a great thrill. I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
Your poise and grace through this tragic situation in your personal life is truly an inspiration to all of us. Anyone who has witnessed you going through all of this have been in awe at your poise. To what do you attribute that?
Straight to God. Straight to God and to Brent's legacy and memory. I think there are moments when I feel I can't stand. I can't do this another minute. I can't accept the reality of the weight of this another moment. And then I pray, and then I wait, and it's as if angels attend to me. And I think of the neighbors and the friends and the community members and strangers across this country who have let us know that we're in their thoughts and prayers. And I think somehow I have become the face of everyone else's faith and hope and charity. I don't represent myself. I promise I'm not this strong. I'm not this graceful. It's coming from all around me and coming from deep within me. And I can only thank God in this great country for buoying me up like this.
Through this whole tragic episode, you and your family have become the focus of great attention and great affection. How does that feel, being the focus of that kind of attention and affection, and how do you handle the emotions that go along with it?
I get emotional a lot. I feel like a roller coaster, up and down. The first thing that I would hope as we become the focus of this attention and affection is that people know we don't look at this as about us. I'm very quick to say we know we represent a much larger body of military men and women. We represent other families through other generations and ours that have paid this price, and those who have been willing to pay this price. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's a huge honor to now know that we are a Gold Star family, because I hold Gold Star families in such high esteem and always have. I used to teach students of American history the importance of respecting the flag and honoring the military and studying the Constitution and the freedoms that we have and the responsibilities that come with that. To now say I fit in that category is incredibly, incredibly humbling. But I also find it very invigorating, because I believe where much is given, much is required. And if my family's been this blessed, then we need to rise up to it and make sure we don't wallow, make sure we don't just greedily receive, but that we find ways to give and to give back. And that's what motivates me, it really does.
You and your family are now Gold Star families. Sadly, yours will not be the last. For those future Gold Star families, what advice and counsel and comfort can you give them?
That's so hard. Every situation is so personal and so individual. One thing I found is that America really does treat us like gold, like people I've never met, people that have never met us. Just an outpouring of love and support. I would tell other families to know they are not alone, to know they are not forgotten, to know their military men or women that they've lost will never be forgotten. And there's some kind of a bond, even with people we don't know, to know that other Gold Star families are now our family, and we stand united in this, just as our husbands or our brothers or our mothers or our sisters stood together in the uniform.
What does the future hold for you and your family now?
Don't ask. I have no idea. I get very anxious if I think too far ahead. The unknown can be a very scary place. The fact that Brent's death came as such a shock does make me hesitant to think I know it all, what might happen or what I'm capable of or what the Lord might think I can handle or learn from. And so for now, we're just taking it a step at a time. Love those children, focus on those children. I pride myself on having supported Brent and loved him and tried to stay out of his way in the things he felt he needed to do in life. And I'm committed to do the same for my children now. So that's the focus. And sometimes that's the little things, getting them to school, helping with homework, going to my PTA meetings where I feel most at home. But I can't think too far ahead, I don't know, other than just helping those children and hoping that they can make it day by day until they can maybe see things through a different perspective as they grow and mature and be able to, take on their own adulthood in their own lives.
Well, Jennie Taylor, widow of Major Brent Taylor, Utah Army National Guard, thank you so much for his service, your sacrifice, his sacrifice, and that of your children.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Thank you, Bob.